Hey everyone, welcome to Around the TV Tray with Sareth Ney. This is my uh, debut of my live stream of my talk show that originated at the Corazon Cinema and Cafe during the Corazon Comedy Festival, which I produced like a couple years ago when Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Matthew hit my favorite theater, the Corazon Cinema and Cafe. And I wanted to give it new life by doing Around the TV Tray with Sareth Ney, where I interview comedians from my home room of the Tiernanog Irish Pub in Daytona Beach, Florida. And speaking of the Tiernanog Irish Pub in Daytona Beach, I'll be raising funds for them. Their PayPal and their Venmo can be seen on the bottom there, as well as their social media handles on Facebook and Instagram. So give them a follow and a like, and donate to them during this time of the quarantine and the COVID-19, because the bars have been shut down again in Florida and due to the coronavirus, and we're going to do our very best to raise funds for them. Every week, I'm going to be interviewing comedians. This is the introductory episode where I'll be talking about my stand-up comedy career and where it started. Um, and then I'm going to shine the light on my pals that are in Florida, in Daytona Beach. And after I get done with interviewing all 20 something of them, I'll branch out to the other cities in Florida, from Tallahassee all the way down to Miami, maybe Pensacola too, because they're right over there, like up north. So might as well get everybody in there and shine the light on the Florida comedy scene because they treated me quite well during my time here. I'm not sure how much longer I'll be in Florida. I'm trying to make my way back to Colorado and build the scene up there as well. Um, so about my journey in stand up, my very first experience, what got me into stand up, I guess my early inspirations were probably watching Eddie Murphy Raw and watching John Leguizamo perform his one man shows. Um, um, and those really stood out to me the most growing up. Um, I did my very first open mic in LA at the Studio City Cafe, known as the Jump Cut Cafe, when it was still around. Um, my pals, while I was doing my apprenticeship out in LA, uh, encouraged at the time, they encouraged me to do stand up. And so I promised them that I would. And so we went out to the open mic, and they arrived, and I couldn't turn back. And I dressed up as my superhero alter ego to do stand up. I had the mask, the cape, the whole nine, shirt, pants, everything to match. And as soon as I got off stage, I did 5 minutes there. Didn't know what I was doing. Didn't even have proper training. That was just my very first experience. I did 5 minutes. The host, I changed into a different shirt, took my mask off, cape off, everything. Changed into new clothes. And he asked, "Hey, where did that superhero go? I need him to do 5 more minutes." And I I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. Uh, I'm his man," and I go, "I'm his manager or something like that." And he goes, "So you're pulling an Andy Kaufman on me, are you?" And I'm like, "Yep, I guess I am." So that was the start of my very first stand-up comedy journey. There, it was in LA, and so um, people say go to a big city like LA and New York and Chicago, Atlanta, and do stand-up. But I didn't want to. Later, I found out that you had to bring people to your shows to get on the stage, or you had to bark, which means to promote the show outside the venue, or got to pay to play, uh, buy a drink so you can get stage time or whatever. So I'm glad that I went in reverse and didn't have to experience all that in those major cities. Um, and sometimes you get like 3 minutes or so or less. So you can't really work on your craft that much 3 minutes at a time, but it's all part of the process and you got to trust it. And that's what I learned. So I moved back home to Pueblo, Colorado, and I started pursuing stand up, but we rarely had any mics, so I only did like there was like one a week. Every once in a while we'd get lucky and a new venue would open, and we would all go there and do our jokes again. And it was cool. It was a really small scene there. There's like probably like less than 10 of us, and like comedians from like Colorado Springs would drive down south to do 5 minutes and stuff like that. And I got to meet some of them and everything like that, and grow some of my network. And I didn't know how to craft my joke, how to jokes or build a set or anything like that. But all I remembered was I never brought anything on stage with me, like a set list or a journal or a notepad or my phone or anything with me. Um, and that was just, I wanted to train myself to be um, someone that didn't rely on that kind of things. Just go off the top of my head, work out some stuff. In fact, I don't even write my own jokes. I don't mean that saying that I have like my own write or anything, meaning that I just tell jokes and I craft them in my brain without writing them down. And that's how my brain functions. It's just like I didn't want to memorize jokes word for word verbatim and make it sound like I'm a robot on stage. So I just wanted to iron out the details and the jokes on stage in live and in your face kind of thing. That was my style. Not knocking anybody else that doesn't do it, but it's just me training my brain to be without those things, those aids, if you will. Um, but I didn't know how to network properly, and I was like probably like a couple months in doing stand up, and I found out about shows, and I went and supported my pals that did shows, and I never asked how to get on or anything like that. And at one time, my friend Wade at the time asked me to be on a show, but the weather was getting crappy and I was getting sick, and so I totally missed out on that opportunity. So that was like my only chance to be on an actual showcase. So I never got to be on one, but I was also a concert journalist back home, and so I said, "Hey, I'm moving to Colorado, Florida. I just want 3 bands, 3 comics to be on the bill, because I might as well produce my own show with a mixture of music and comedy." And so, but that one show idea turned out to be something else. It blossomed into a huge monster, a good monster. There's good and bad monsters. I tagged one member of each band that I wrote about, and they said we all want in on this, and you're not leaving here that easy. And so I ended up booking everybody, and I asked them, I don't know how I'm going to pay you guys, and they're like, well, you did enough for us. You interviewed us, wrote reviews for us, photographed us. You don't need to pay us this year, or we would do this for free. And I'm like, okay. So everyone was on board. They brought all their instruments and their fans, and it was just the best 3 day night festival. So I ended up getting um, uh, a festival first before my first ever showcase. And so surprisingly, they named it Sareth Fest. They named it after me. And we've been going like coming in September will be 7 years strong. So that's pretty awesome. 4 months later, um, I didn't. I was planning on moving to Florida in November so I could spend Thanksgiving with my family, but that didn't work out as planned. So I ended up staying 4 more months, and I stayed in Colorado. And I said, "All right, this is the real deal. I'm moving next month, maybe like March or April or something. I think it was March." And I said, "I just want, I just want, I want to leave here on a roast." And so that's what I did. I left on a roast. It was my very first showcase. I booked it, picked all the comedians and the musicians and my best friend Sean and stuff, and we all roasted each other as a classical roast, like Don Rickles, like the Richard Pryor roast, like the Comedy Central roast that you see on TV, and it's on YouTube now, and it's like 500 views. Um, and so I was like, all right. So I moved to Florida. My parents picked me up from Colorado, and it was like a 30-hour trip, and it was a long trip, and we ended up staying like a couple of nights in Memphis, and I had no idea what Uber and any of those were, and I didn't know there was like a comedy scene there, so I never went out during my 5 night stay. We just ended up going to Graceland, which was and had barbecue. So that was about it. That's all I can remember from Memphis. And then we finally made our way down to Florida. Um, I was trying to get my feet wet in Florida with open mics and stuff, and all I could find were music open mics in like St. Augustine and stuff like that, and Flagler Beach. And so I ended up just doing stand up at those places, but they were mostly music open mics, and they were not expecting some dirty jokes out of me. I remembered I did one in at this place called Sarbez in St. Augustine, and I did my dirty jokes, and the whole place laughed, of course, and everyone from the kitchen walked out and just stood there and watched and laughed along with it. And that was my first experience in Florida comedy. And then I asked around in Flagler Beach at the open mic at Finn's, I believe they're called, and he said, "Yeah, there's an open mic that they do stand up comedy in. It's in Daytona, so it's quite the drive. It's like an hour away." And that was like the closest. And I ended up doing that mic for like the longest time. And that's why I'm raising funds for the Tiernog Irish Pub. That was like the second place that I did it in Daytona. The first place was called the Daytona Tap Room, I believe, but it was so loud in there, and the acoustics was just insane for stand up. It's great for music, but not much for stand up. Um, so I talked to the other comics and asked them where's other places I can do stand up, and they said the Nog. And so I went to the Nog, and at first I got lost. I thought I was at Ormond Beach, and got lost there. And I should have went further south. Should have put it in my GPS, but I didn't. And but I eventually found it, and everyone was really cool there, and they became my second family. They welcomed me with open arms with my weird stand-up comedy, and they let me sign up twice as my superhero alter ego sometimes, and just go up twice telling superhero and music jokes as Wu Manchu, and telling my dirty jokes as myself. My buddy Zach, he's gonna be my next week's guest. We're gonna talk about his career. But I asked him, should I go as Wu Manchu or should I go as myself? And he goes, definitely yourself. And he definitely had some pointers for me in how to, perfect my stand up. And here's the transition here because he's been doing a lot more longer than I have, and it's great to have someone that has done it longer than I have, stand up wise, and to like show me the way. And I've had some great folks there like Ken in Orlando and Christina up in Jacksonville, and people throughout the years have really taken me under their wing and like critiqued me and made me a better comic. Um, what else? I learned more about the Florida scene, and I found out that the closest mics were indeed an hour and an hour and a half away. So there was no mics in my town for stand up at all, not for like the longest time. But I didn't mind it. I liked the drive. It taught me that I had like in order to be a comic, I had to drive to far and wide for comedy. I had to like dive in there and go head first, and I got to practice my sets in the car, so that way I never got like stage fright or anything like that, and I knew what I was going to say, and I can just mingle with my friends, and I can conduct interviews before and after the shows with the comics, and I ended up photographing each one for like the longest time, like 4 years straight before the pandemic hit. And they all use my photos as their promo pictures and their social media profile photos, and it warms my heart and stuff to see my images I took are being used in the coolest ways. Never ask for photo credit, but when they do, it warms my heart. Um, and I ended up doing. I'm glad that my parents forced me to move to Florida because to do stand up because I would have gotten snowed in on. The drives to like northern Colorado would have been a pain in the butt. I'm glad I'm centrally located to like all the cool scenes in Florida. That I can just do Melbourne if I need to and drive like 2 hours south, and Orlando an hour and a half, and Jacksonville and Daytona an hour north and south from me. And so it taught me all that good stuff. So yeah, I did a show or a contest or whatever once a month for like the past. I was actually going really heavy in the beginning, to be honest with you, and then eventually I was like, I'm just gonna do one show a month because these shows don't pay anything. I don't do it for money, of course. I don't do anything for money, but just to like the ones that did pay, uh, were pretty decent. Like two drinks they would give us, or food, um, or they would give us like $20, but not enough to survive off of. That's for sure. Mm, um, my I got to perform in a couple of A rooms. Like uh, my first experience was probably the Comedy Works in downtown Denver. Um, I remember taking my best friend at Sean Beeman with me, and messaged the guy that hosted the show called Thick Skin, and he said that he couldn't put me on, and I felt bad, but I still went up there to support him after my festival. I promised him that I would. But to my surprise, they were roasting us the whole night. After I signed up for the open mic, hoping I would get drawn out, like be one of the comics, and the host recognized my name, and he noticed me, of course, and from the press kit that I sent him, and him and his co-host roasted me from the stage, with my best friend, and so they brought three people up for the last uh, open mic bucket thing, and they pointed to the first guy, and the room was silent, and they skipped over I was in the middle. They skipped over me, and the crowd just cheered. And they were like, "No, wait, we'll go to the third guy." No voices, like no cheers or nothing. And they pointed to me, and I ended up getting the 4 minute spot. So, one of the guys actually brought his parents there, and so sadly he didn't get to go up. I felt really bad, but I was like, I'm getting the stage time. This is like a historic club. I got to do it. And the crowd just was with me every step of the way, and it was such an awesome feeling. What else? I also performed at the Orlando Improv, which was cool. Uh, I made like a long Twitter thread of like my experiences there. That was like the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I'll share with you the good. I promoted it like the week early. Well, I recorded like on the radio our episodes like on a Sunday, and it would air that day of the show. And I uh, I I didn't expect many people to show up to that show because I had like 20 people on my guest list. The headliner had like 60 something, 70 people on his guest list, so there was like 90 people. Other people had like 8 people, maybe, like that, and the room fit like 300 people. And so we get there, and we didn't start on time, and I'm like, what? Why aren't we starting on time? And they're like, because more people are showing up. And I'm like, are you serious? And they're like, yep. And at the end of the day, there was like at the end of the total, it was like 280 people out of the 300 thing. And I'm like, holy crap, like my promotion worked, and like the people that were on the interview, like on the radio, worked and stuff like that. And my article worked, and there was no promotional stuff at all at the venue or nothing like that. And some of the people that were on the bill didn't promote it because they weren't getting paid, which was understandable. But to have 280 people show up at that venue was super dope. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. And then another time, I did super well at my friend. He ran the open mic at the other bar in Orlando. His name's Ken Miller. He's like the godfather of stand up. Orlando's a stand up, and everyone goes to him when everything goes good or bad or whatever. Always checking on us, which is really cool. And he goes, "All right, you got 5 minutes and to do stand up." And um, I was thinking I was doing my 1/2 hour 1 man show there, and I brought all these props, and I'm like, he goes, "We ain't got time for that." I'm like, "All right." So we ended up doing 5 minutes, but before that, I went on the Tom and Dan show, and they interviewed me, and it's on my press kit at aqdpi.com/epk. And I got interviewed on the radio for that. It was like a 45-minute interview, and the whole place got packed, and it was amazing. and I did 5 minutes. He warned me that goes, if you were bombing, you only get 5 minutes, but if you do super well, you get seven. And I did super well, and I got seven. And everyone before me, I remember that night, everyone was bombing, and I was like, all right, I gotta. This is all or nothing. And so I went up and just killed, and my pals were cheering me on, and they pointed out that people were just on the floor laughing, and that's on my press kit as well on my website. You'll see the performance on here too. It's under my comedy videos on Facebook. Um, so that's pretty rad. Um, and also, uh, I I went on a tour uh, that was like 14 shows, 10 nights from Jacksonville all the way up to Savannah to Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, Tallahassee, St. Augustine, Orlando, Daytona, Flagler Beach, just all over, like Florida and Georgia, pretty much, like, and except for South Florida, but I did everything else from like the Florida, Georgia, all the cool rooms, anyways, from like Birds Aphrodisiac, Oyster Bar, and the Relapse Theater. That place was sold out. That was nuts. Like, that video's on here on my YouTube channel, and it was the most incredible feeling. Like, I usually stand still on stage when I do jokes, but like there was so many people, and there was like a wave of just laughs, that it kept on pushing me back a couple steps, and I'm like, it was just a natural form of energy that just kept on pushing me back, and it was like the coolest experience ever. And they were making grilled cheese in the corner, and people were sitting on the ground, and people were standing in the very back, and I've never. That was just the most coolest experience ever, like stand up wise. Like, I'd say that would be like the top. I think the second best, my favorite performance ever. Um, uh, as compared to like the Orlando Improv. Um, I'd say Comedy Works was my first favorite. Then the Relapse Theater, and then the Orlando Improv, like in that order. But I've always had a soft spot for the Nog, which I'll remind you again to like help donate them during this cause. Their PayPal and Venmos are on the bottom. They're scrolling, and their social media handles as well. Follow them and like them on Facebook and Instagram. Um, but it's been a wild ride as for stand up. I mean, from the roast to the open mics to the shows to the tours, and I'm hoping to do more tours in the future. I was planning on retiring. I'm always planning on retiring, and I think people are tired of it. Um, I also recorded an album called Sex Jokes and Rock and Roll, where I do all my dirtiest jokes. And I just put it on record, and it's like 25 minutes long. But I put a hidden bonus track from like a previous one that I recorded. So the first 25 minutes took place at Uncle Waldo's, which is like a pool hall in South Daytona Beach, and people were all with it. And I remembered bringing like a box of Hostess Ding Dongs with me to the show, and it cost me like $4, but some lady wanted to buy it, and I was gonna sell them like for like $1 a piece or something, or give them out for free. But she ended up buying them for $6, and then I ended up getting paid for the show, and I burned the CDs myself and designed the cover art, and did all the text on that insert, and placed the stickers on the CDs, um, and so I just put that all on disc, and I sold like 8 of them while I was on tour. So I ended up taking $400 with me on that tour, that 14-day tour called this Dirty Son of a Peach tour. But I forgot my money at home, which I'm glad that my parents were still here in Florida at the time, and I told them where I hid the money, and they um, uh, I uh, I actually saved like $300, I think it was. But my dad gave me an extra $100, and he sent it via Western Union, and I picked it up at Publix, and so I ended up coming home with $40 left in my pocket, and which was more than I expected. I was expecting to be more in the red, but $40 was all right. Uh, let's see here. So my stand-up journey, of course, I created the Corazon Cinnamon Comedy Festival, and that's where the original Around the TV Tray with Sareth Ney was born. And I wanted to give it a brand new life, and so this is it. Um, so you can see all my stand-up comedy videos, my roast, and everything on that on my YouTube channel. I put it in a special playlist that's on the top for you all. And then subscribe and like and all that stuff, and donate if you can to the venue, to the Irish Pub, and follow them and on all the social medias. Uh, that's scrolling on the bottom too. And next week, I think I pretty much summed up all my stand-up comedy stuff. I performed in Chicago a couple times, twice, LA twice, and they were all sold out too. So all the venues, so that was pretty rad. Never expected those places to pack out, but shout out to the Improv Space by UCLA in LA, and the Van Nuys Comedy Club in Springbok, in Van Nuys, the Annoyance Theater in Chicago, the Red Line Tap that used to be the Red Line Tap, but is no longer there. Shout out to them and everyone involved. And the Relapse Theater, the Wormhole, and all the cool venues from Melbourne to Tallahassee that I got to perform on. And thank you all so much for giving me a place to perform and perfect my craft. Sometimes when I bomb, it hurts, but it's part of the process. But next week, I'm having Zach Bennett. He is the godfather of Daytona Beach comedy, and I'm looking forward to having him as my guest next week. And we're going to continue to gain more followers for everyone that I'll be interviewing, and raising funds for everybody as well that I'm interviewing, as well as my homeroom during COVID-19. And I think that's it. That's pretty much my stand-up comedy journey, and I'll always keep Sareth Fest going, and my buddies Barrett Skoll helps me with the first uh, designs, the second and third designs, and from the 4th to the 7th, my pal Charlie McMullen and I have collaborated on the Sareth Fest desserts, not desserts, but designs for the shirts. There you go. And it's like a combination of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and Hellraiser, and we're just paying homage to and inspiration to Ralph Steadman and Hunter S. Thompson and Clive Barker. They're like my favorite writers and artists. So we just mashed those up together, and it's pretty neat how they come around and all that stuff. So we got so much plans for the future after COVID goes away, and I'm hoping that we don't live stream any of the stand-up portion or the music portion of the fest this year. But if worse comes to worse, we'll have to do that. Everybody will be compensated for their time on stage, and all that good stuff. So hopefully we see you in September. Hopefully I'll be living permanently in Colorado in December. We'll see how that goes. But I'll be centrally located, and I can go on more tours, and that's what I'm looking forward to. So thank you again for joining me on the first episode of Around the TV Tray with Sareth Ney. Follow the Tiernanog Irish Pub and donate to them via Venmo and PayPal, scrolling on the bottom. And other information's on the bottom of this in the description box in the below on YouTube. So I will see you next month, where my guest is Zach Bennett, and I will see you then. Good night, and I will see you next week. I'll say goodbye now. I promise. I swear. Thank you for tuning in to Around the TV Tray with